We're ready to go, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Combined Authorities website. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Mike Davey, who is attending in the place of Councillor Mike Sargent today. Owing to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales Regulations 2020. To members of the public, if you do not want to be identifiable, please choose a pseudonym. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Combined Authorities website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I'd ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting, and to keep their microphones muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. If we do run into any technical problems, I'd ask for your patience and we'll try to solve them as quickly as possible. I would remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. Start off with part one, governance items. Attendance. Members, I will begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence, and if you would please confirm your presence. Councillor Steve Allen.
In attendance.
Well done, thank you very much. Councillor David Ambrose-Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Davey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Present.
Good. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you, good. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Present.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Chris Bowden. 1.1, apologies for absence and declarations of interest and announcements. Start off with apologies for absence. Would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence?
We've received apologies from Councillor Mike Sargent and Councillor Mike Davies attending as substitute.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Would you please click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now if you wish to declare any interest? I see no hands raised. If anything occurs to any member during the course of the meeting and they realise they do have an interest which they should declare, please do make sure that that is declared immediately. Thank you. Announcements. In item 2.8, the Houghton and Witton Community Land Trust Startup Grant application. This has been removed from the agenda owing to further clarification required on the information which is presented within the application, and that application being an appendix to the main report. Once this clarification is received, the application may be brought to a future committee meeting. And members, we have also included a replacement agenda item 2.1 relating to the £100 million affordable housing programme. John Hill and Kim Sawyer are in attendance, and John will be presenting the report on the replacement agenda item paper. There has been some correspondence over the weekend concerning the Mayor's attendance today and his willingness to answer questions concerning agenda item 2.1. Councillor Smith had asked in particular that he not speak before the agenda item is actually discussed. So I took it upon myself to check the Constitution to see what the constitutional position is. And it turns out, as a result of a couple of unfortunate occurrences, that the Mayor isn't actually entitled to come and speak to us at all in this committee. The main problem is he hasn't officially taken up his position as a member of this committee, as he's entitled to, even if it is a non-voting member, and this will be taken up at the next leaders meeting. I had hoped to be able to suspend the relevant rule which stopped the mayor from attending and speaking. Unfortunately, the rules state that committees can't suspend that particular rule. That's another matter which I'll be taking up at the next leaders strategy meeting so that we can get that right in future. Right. Move on now to agenda item 1.2, which are the Housing and Communities Committee minutes, which are on pages 5 to 18. And they're the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 11th of January 2021. And we're being asked to approve these minutes as a correct record. May I ask any member who doesn't agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function, please, now? Since I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as correct, I will take that as carried. Thank you very much indeed, members. Agenda item 1.2, which is on pages 5 to 18, are the actions. An updated action log was included in the published papers for this meeting. If any members have any questions concerning the action log, would they be kind enough to raise their hand now using the raised hand function to show this? No members have indicated that they wish to speak, so we'll take the action log as noted. Agenda item 1.3 is public questions. And I propose to take these public questions. We've received a number of questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in relation to item 2.1. And what I propose to do is to take those questions at the start of agenda item 2.1. Item 1.4 is the agenda plan on pages 27 to 30 of the pack. Do any committee members have any comments on the agenda plan, please? No comments. We'll take that as noted. And do any members have any comments on the forward plan for the combined authority? Again, we'll take that as noted. Thank you very much indeed. We can now move to part 2 of the meeting, programme delivery. And we start with agenda item 2.1, the £100 million housing programme. This will be introduced by John Hill, but we do, I emphasise, have a replacement agenda item 2.1 to discuss. But before we start, I wonder if we may move to the questions which have been raised by O&S, all of which are on this subject. And may I ask Councillor Scott if she'd care to ask her questions one at a time, please. Councillor Scott.
Councillor Bowden, Councillor Scott, we can't find Councillor Scott on the attendees list. Councillor Dupre is on the attendees list, but Councillor Scott isn't there.
Does Councillor Dupre have a copy of the questions?
I haven't been made aware that she would be attending to ask the questions. I can.
If necessary, then an officer can ask the questions and I'll be happy to answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can ask the questions, Councillor Bowden. That's fine.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Be a moment. Okay, so for the first question, does the combined authority have an action plan to achieve a resolution? Oh, my apologies, Councillor Scott's now here.
Ah, right, okay. Good afternoon, Councillor Scott.
I'm so sorry, Chair. Yes, thanks so much. And thank you also to Tamar for stepping in there. I do appreciate it. So yes, I'll go ahead and ask the questions if I may.
Most certainly.
Thank you, thank you. The first question is, does the combined authority have an action plan to achieve a resolution on the 3 key issues for the CPCA Affordable Housing Program, namely 1, the program end date of March 2021 or March 2022, 2, receipt of the 45 million of outstanding monies. We have so far received 55 million. And of course, we understand that there may have been a problem arisen recently about the 45 million. And 3, inclusion or removal of the 243 units already captured as starts on the site at North Star. And further, if there is an action plan, we'd appreciate your advice as to what the terms of the plan are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Following the response to the review received from the Minister, the updated paper 2.1, which has been circulated, responds to all of these issues. The programme in its current form will end on 31st March 2021, and we will not receive that £45 million as part of this programme, and the inclusion of the 243 units at Northstowe has been considered ineligible by MHCLG.
Thank you, Chair. And I did have a further question from that, which was on the programme end date. However, you've answered that. Thank you. And there were some additional questions, if I may ask those. If no further funding is received, and that is, as you have confirmed, the case from government, which schemes already approved for grants shall not be able to proceed? Further, what difficulties are envisaged with schemes that have already begun on site, but for which all or part of the funding has not been paid over? And further to that, will the 5 schemes that are receiving loans be affected if no further funding is received? And finally, what indication, if any, has been given about the amount of alternative funding that the government has said it will consider making available to the 31st of March 2022, and about any conditions that may be attached to it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Scott. First of all, I must correct your first question. I didn't say that no further funding is going to be received from government. What I did say was that no further funding under that scheme was going to be received from government. Government has made it quite clear that, subject to conditions, and the conditions can be seen in paragraph 3.3 of the revised agenda item 2.1, that further funding will be available to us. And it is our understanding at the moment that that further funding should mean that all of the items which are in our programme will be able to be funded. We expect all of the schemes which are starting on site before 31st March 2021 will proceed as normal. And as I was just saying, any schemes starting after this will be subject to that process with MHCLG. So far as difficulties with schemes that have already started on site, we're not expecting any difficulties at all. If they have started on site or will be starting before 31st March 2021, they should progress as normal. As far as the 5 schemes receiving loans are concerned, subject to any further input from MHCLG, we are not expecting the performance of the existing 5 loans to be affected. And so far, finally, as what indication there's been about alternative funding that the government has said it will consider, it is actually too early to say on the amount at the moment on that. The process and conditions are referred to in the revised paper 2.1, paragraph 3.3, but we're not yet in a position to give a definitive answer on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, and I understand I would have 1 minute to ask a supplementary if I may, and I would like to ask this, which is what steps, if any, has the Combined Authority taken or would it take in order to raise or find alternative sources of funding in addition to or apart from government? I realise that there is some potential uncertainty about this, but my reading of the business case and the Combined Authority terms and conditions are that there wasn't an onus or an expectation that the Combined Authority would seek alternative funding from sources other than and in addition to government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. It may have been necessary to consider that previously. It now is our opinion that, subject to the satisfactory fulfilment of the conditions which are listed in paragraph 3.3 of the revised agenda item 2.1, and subject to individual schemes having a subsidy value of no greater than on average £45,000, we believe. Subject to that, we believe that there will be no requirement to look for additional funds in order to fulfill both our existing commitments and any new ones that we may have up until the start date of 31st March 2022. So at the moment, there are no plans to look for alternative funding because we don't believe that that's going to be necessary.
That could be wise,
I do see Councillor Smith's hand is up, which is not usual in questions, but I'm happy to make an exception in Councillor Smith's case.
Thank you. It's a point of clarification, Councillor Bowden, please, in relation to your answer to the previous question where you referenced 3.3. I think we need to be really, really careful about what we're saying in relation to certainty over future funding. So 3.3 says that further funding will be available subject to the following conditions. I think we need to be very, very cautious about saying that further funding will be coming, because we do not yet have any indication about whether we are going to be able to fulfill all those quite demanding conditions. So I think we have to be completely honest with people in that further funding cannot be guaranteed, and there is considerable doubt about it at this stage until we have seen details about how the combined authority is going to fulfill all these conditions. We really cannot be misleading people on this at this stage, please.
Whilst you are correct, Councillor Smith, that there is no guarantee of funding, the indications are, and our interpretation of the conditions are, that this funding is now extremely likely. That is our belief, and there is no guarantee of it, as you yourself said. But this news that we have received from the Minister is, in fact, substantially better than might have been expected, especially given some of the earlier correspondence there had been. And it's now going to be necessary for civil servants to have discussions with our joint chief executives in order to ensure that these conditions are fulfilled. We believe they can be.
So I'm very confident you're feeling very confident, but I'm not feeling very confident at all.
May I suggest that you discuss that when we get to agenda item 2.1? You're always welcome to get an extra bite of the cherry, though. Right. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Scott, for asking your questions.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We now move on to agenda item 2.1, which is the revised paper on the £100 million housing programme. And I wonder if I may ask John Hill to introduce this paper, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing us to table this urgent replacement item, and again extending our apologies to members of the committee who would normally be afforded more notice to consider what's a very important item. But hopefully members will understand that developments have happened quite quickly, and we do want to give an opportunity for this committee to review these issues prior to them being reported to board. As you said, Chairman, this replaces the existing agenda item 2.1, but I think that still is quite useful background information to your discussions later on. As was indicated by the member from the Scrutiny Committee, the MHCLG's review focused initially on 3 areas: the end date for the programme, the outstanding funding to the CPCA for its programme, and the issue of Northstowe. Members will be aware this has been extended and linked to issues related to value for money and additionality. MHCLG have now reached their conclusion, and I expect the first headline is that they will no longer support the further implementation of the 100 million programme, as you said in your introduction, Chairman. The 243 units from Northstowe will now be excluded from the original programme. And members who've seen the letter from the Minister to members of the CPCA board will know that despite that, they are still willing to have discussions with officers of the Combined Authority should you wish to instruct us to secure a revised scheme. And as Councillor Smith said, that is subject to a number of conditions that are outlined in paragraph 3.3. And I expect in summary those are that any resources that we may wish to secure from government will be first, we will be first obliged to find that from our existing programme and any returns of loan funds to the main, to the CA within March 2022. I think it's also fair to say that the new regime is very much a more hands-on monitoring of our scheme, and you'll see quite detailed and conditions that we will have to meet scheme by scheme. And if you are minded to agree the recommendation today to proceed, we've got a lot of work to be done, and members will notice there's a lot more meat to be put on the bone. But I think, and I want to keep it relatively brief, Chairman, because I know there's a need for discussions and questions, but I think the option's quite stark for members really, which is to say to government, thank you, but no thank you, or to say to officers and to the board that it's a scheme that we want to, the revised scheme that we want to continue, being aware of all the conditions, and we want officers to start working on the detail of that. Before I finish, and certainly last but not least, to touch on the 70 million Cambridge City programme, it's quite clear that the government will be releasing any final allocations if they haven't already done so. The CPAC's agent role in the 70 million will cease, and we will have to provide evidence, which we're happy to do so, that we've transferred all the money that was given to us for the purposes of the £70 million programme. My recommendations, Chair, are detailed on the first page of the report, and I understand there is an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hill. Following the normal rules of debate, advance notice has been given of an amendment to this motion from Councillor Smith, and it would be appropriate, therefore, for us to move directly to the amendment and to discuss the amendment to the motion. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Is it possible to display those amendments, please, on the screen?
Rhiannon, are you able to share that for us?
Because there's people, I'm sure, listening in who.
Yeah, if you just give me a minute, I will find it. Thank you.
All right, so if I, I'm very grateful if you could share that. I've amended item 1 to say that I think, I would like to see full public disclosure of all correspondence related to this matter between the CLG ministers, with the combined authority and or the mayor and the mayor. I think that's really important. I've written twice now to ask for sight of a second letter from the minister, which I believe the mayor referenced in a radio interview. I didn't hear it, but I've been told he referenced a second letter from the minister. And I've asked again today for that to be shared, and I haven't had a response. So I think as a matter of urgency, the members of this board and courtesy, the members of this board should have sight of any additional correspondence between the minister and the mayor, because I think that relates to the conditions that have been put on this scheme. I think it is imperative that this board, as part of its duty of care over public money, requests that the board instigate an independent audit of the whole programme to go into much greater detail about where failings have occurred and hopefully get a proper plan in place for lessons learned for future use of public money. And I've just gone blank on what the third one was now. Can you get it up?
Report back within 4 weeks.
Oh right, yes. So I think so. This committee has been a very good committee. We've had excellent debates over since its inception. It's been a very collaborative committee, and I think there is a huge amount for us to contribute. So we are being told some pretty high level stuff here with absolutely no detail behind it about, should we choose to proceed with funding affordable housing. There's no detail here at all about how we intend to do that, how the returned monies from the £40 million rolling fund will be used, and how we will speed up delivery and address the issue of affordability, which seems to have fallen off the agenda of the whole affordable housing scheme. So I think this committee should reconvene in 4 weeks' time to start looking at the emerging delivery plan that addresses all the requirements here from MHCLG and gives reassurance to those of us who are partners in the combined authority, but also to our residents, that everything possible is being done to secure the delivery of an amount of affordable housing that we have been leading people to believe they are going to get for the last 3 years.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Smith. May I ask if you have a seconder for that amendment?
I believe so.
Councillor Davey, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, Councillor Bowden, I was happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Open this up for discussion. Any member wishes to speak? If no,
Bowden, are we going to take each one in turn, or are you taking them as a whole? It'd be probably better to take them in turn, if that's all right.
That's a procedural matter. I'm just going to let people speak to your amendments first, and then we can deal with the procedural matters later, if we may. Councillor, I actually saw Councillor Davies' hand up first, and given that he's a seconder, if he wishes to second now, he's welcome to do so. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bowden. For me, as a first attendee at the Housing Committee, the key priority has to be about the residents of the combined authority in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and clearly something's not gone right in this, and looking at the documentation it's quite apparent that's the case. I would therefore suggest that each of these 5 now proposed, if you include the amendments, be taken separately, because they do all reflect slightly different requirements. I think the first thing, the first amendment, a full public disclosure makes a great deal of sense, because it's about how we are transparent as a committee, and how we're able to demonstrate to our residents that we're doing everything we can to ensure that the programme will be maintained and can continue. And that is required, therefore, it just makes sense to do that openly. I think number 4 for me is the key one. I know John Hill said at the start about asking the officers to go away and come back with proposals following on from the recent communications to the MHCLG. But unless we know what mistakes have been made, and that's done independently, it's very difficult to know how we should improve and change and enhance the programme that's already happened. And by my reckoning, there's a potential here to lose some in the region of over 600 homes for residents within Cambridgeshire who'd like to have their homes within Cambridgeshire. That can't be right. So therefore, to not bring in someone dependent would seem to be foolhardy. And so therefore, if you do the independent piece of work that must be done, I think, in relatively pacey, I think it's therefore imperative that we then learn the lessons and we're able to deliver a good programme as part of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. The final one, number 5, has already been indicated by John earlier on. We're still trying to work out the details and the process. It therefore makes sense, I think, that we bring back a report to this committee as soon as is humanly possible, because again, this is really important stuff. And unless we know what the proposals are and able to scrutinise that and offer support if necessary, or challenge if necessary, then we're not going to move forward. So I would therefore urge that all the amendments that Councillor Smith's proposed are taken forward. And as she indicated, I think it makes sense to do them independently, because I think some may attract more attention and more interest than others. Thank you very much, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Fuller, sorry, I overlooked you before, but Councillor Davey did indicate a seconder. Councillor Fuller.
That's quite all right, Chairman. Could we have clarity on where the conditions at 3.3 have come from? Because if they've come from a second letter that's being referred to, I think on a pure governance basis, this committee making decisions today based on information that we're not party to, despite members of this committee, as Councillor Smith has said, I'm the other one that's been asking to see that letter. We haven't seen that. And without unduly criticising any officers of the combined authority or anyone that supported us thus far, we have had several reassurances in recent months around the £45 million being forthcoming that have turned out not to be accurate. So I'm less prepared now, I have to say, Chairman, to take assurances in this report when we haven't seen the source of that information. And I'm afraid for me, it's a principle thing. And, you know, I appreciate this won't satisfy all of my colleagues, but for me, it's a principle that at least two members of this committee have asked to see a letter that allegedly exists between a government minister and the mayor. That's not a private letter, Chairman. If that's been written by a minister, that is subject to freedom of information requests. So there is absolutely no reason why it couldn't or shouldn't be put in the public domain. And that members of this committee have asked to see that to reinforce the decision making we're being asked to make today. And we've been ignored or just sent the other way. I think that's unacceptable. So on that basis alone, Chairman, I'm prepared in principle to support Councillor Smith's recommendation 1, and I shall reserve my judgment on the others to hear the rest of the debate. But I would like clarification, please, on where those conditions at 3.3 have come from.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I wonder if Mr. Hill or any other officer is in a position to be able to answer the points made by Councillor Fuller. First of all, confirmation from officers that the conditions which are outlined in paragraph 3.3 accurately reflect what the minister has said. And secondly, the question as to why that particular letter has not been made available to members generally.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I take the first part of that and ask Robert Parkin to comment on the second? The conditions that are outlined in 3.3 are very much taken from correspondence and discussion between the Mayor and Minister. We have made it clear in our discussions with civil servants that we intended to detail those conditions into the report, because I wanted members to fully understand the detail of those rather than providing a summary to you. And so they are, as Councillor Fuller said, resulting from discussions with the Mayor, discussions with the Mayor related to correspondence received by the Mayor, and thirdly, discussions with civil servants. Thank you. But if Robert could comment on the access to the information, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Robert.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, so taking from John's answer that he's confident that the paper provides all the information it needs. The question of correspondence, which this amendment is looking to refer to, obviously, if a request for information comes in, we'd need to take that request step by step and look at it under the Freedom of Information rules. But there's no outright rule that says that simply a reference to communications means that it automatically goes into the public domain. I think the important points for this are that the presentation in the report is considered to be complete on the original recommendation for a decision to make, and that separately, if there is a request for access to any documentation of the combined authority, that will take that as that request comes in, Chair.
Thank you for that response. Councillor Fuller, would you care to ask anything further on that matter?
Sorry, I'm still muted. Well, it's just a point of clarification. I wasn't suggesting in any way that just because the correspondence has been referenced, it should be placed in the public domain. I think the principle and concern I've raised today is I was quite prepared to accept others' judgment on that issue. The principal concern I have is that there has been a resistance to sharing with us correspondence that is being referred to repeatedly as the basis for decisions we're being expected to make today. Now, the cynic in me starts to worry in any public authority when there is a reluctance to share what could easily be a public letter under freedom of information. So on the basis that people are seeking to not let us have that, I'm more inclined than ever before to see it, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin.
Yeah, I mean, I won't comment on anything other than one point, which is that, of course, freedom of information request doesn't necessarily result in disclosures, and of course, there are various exemptions that could apply to a letter. And again, I don't know the details of this, whether it exists or not. It's so I wouldn't. I think it's wrong to make the assumption that it would be an automatic result, that a request would result in disclosure. Matters that are confidential and indeed correspondence with ministers in some instances are exempt under the rules. So I wouldn't want to prejudice any request, number one. And number two, I think on the point about whether the report is complete enough to supply members with information for the decision, that's not for me. But I think John's commented on that, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Goldsack next.
Thank you, Chair. A little bit like Councillor Davey, first time at the meeting, so this may be a bit of an Emperor's New Clothes style question. I apologise. It's about amendments from Councillor Smith, numbers 4 and 5. If we were to request the board urgently commission a full independent report, that's going to be quite an exercise and cost a lot of money, I assume. Do I then understand that report is expected to be back within 4 weeks at point 5? Am I reading that right, or have I got that incorrect? Because if that's correct, then there's no way that a full report can come back within 4 weeks. Just a bit confused on the amendment, please.
I will allow Councillor Smith to respond to that when she next speaks. Are there any other members who haven't yet spoken who would like to speak on this amendment? Then, before bringing Councillor Smith back to sum up, I'll give my thoughts on these amendments, and more than happy to take Councillor Smith's procedural amendment of taking each recommendation in turn. The most important part of this item is that it is being used to instruct the chief executives to inform MHCLG that we agree to what they have suggested, and they have given us a deadline to respond by March the 17th. Therefore, this is the only opportunity that we have to make that agreement. If this amendment is passed, then instead of approving the revised proposals, we'll be approving them conditionally. And I am far from sure that that will satisfy the minister. I think it is quite dangerous to subject the approval of our future delivery and completion of the housing programme, to subject that to the disclosure of documents is an unnecessary, and it's a potentially dangerous thing for us to do. So far as the full independent audit of the £100 million affordable housing programme is concerned, my suggestion would be that by the time of the next housing committee meeting, we will be in a much stronger position for officers to bring a full and comprehensive report to this committee. Once we see the content of that report, it would then be more appropriate, especially if the arrangements have been made by that time with MHCLG, for any consideration to take place as to whether there is needed any full independent audit. And finally, to say that a detailed report be brought back within the next 4 weeks to an emergency meeting. First of all, we don't have a guarantee that within the next 4 weeks the whole matter will be resolved. It depends upon the amount of time that it takes for civil servants and the CPCA chief executives to reach agreement on the various points which are made in item 3.3. And secondly, there is no urgency requiring this to happen before our next meeting, when we will have, I'm quite confident, a full and complete report which is able to be produced by officers, which will be able to be debated by members in the usual way, with a full amount of notice being given for the of the agenda items, and to reach an appropriate conclusion based on the circumstances which then exist. And it's for those reasons I suggest that we do not approve the amendments which have been put forward today. Councillor Smith, you've indicated to sum up. I think you're the final one.
Thank you very much. If I could take each amendment in turn. I'm sorry, I'm absolutely astounded that as a board member, I'm being instructed to resort to FOIs of the board of which I'm a full member. Is absolutely extraordinary. And I've belonged to numerous boards over my my professional working life, and as a board member I've always worked on the assumption that I could request full disclosure of any evidence or correspondence I want. So I'm absolutely stunned to find out that actually my position on this board is so inconsequential that I I have no greater rights than a member of the public to see information. So I think that's disgraceful that we are being expected to issue FOIs on our own board, beyond belief. So moving on. So the combined authority will have lost trust of our residents in this. We must be the only combined authority that has lost money that's been awarded to it. This is an absolute scandal. So, not only has the combined authority, as things stand at the moment, failed to secure a second devolution deal, we have had the large part of the deal we had now taken away from us because of the ministers and the ministry's lack of confidence in us to be able to spend public money wisely. And I think it's really important to remember this wasn't extra money, this wasn't new money, this was money that we would have got anyway without a combined authority as part of our ongoing relationships with Homes England. So the very point of a devolution deal is that it devolves money down that would have been centrally controlled to a level at which it recognises the value of the local better. So we failed abysmally on that. So we have lost the confidence of our residents. We absolutely will have lost the confidence of the developers and those registered social landlords, some of whom didn't have much confidence in us anyway. And we've lost the confidence of the government. So the only way that we can re-establish any level of credibility here is by being completely open and transparent. And you can only do that by asking external independent people in to do an absolute in-depth review of what we've done and hopefully highlight lots of good stuff we've done, as well as where these major failings are. So I put that in to help us re-establish our credibility with our residents, which is pretty rock bottom at the moment. And in relation to coming back to this committee, so picking up on Councillor Goldsack's comments, my apologies if this was confusing. Absolutely not was I expecting a full audit to be able to report back in 4 weeks. These things take months and months, as we know. But there has to be a pretty quick action plan from the combined authority to reassure us how we are going to meet all those requirements that MHCLG have been itemised in 3 here. So I just think it's really important that we don't just leave it to officers to get this all sorted out and then come back and present us with a fait accompli. I think as members, with considerable experience of this over the last since the lifetime of the combined authority, but also preceding that, I think we can add value into it. So I think officers should start working stuff up, and then it needs to come back to us so that we can input our own views and our own expertise, so that by the time we do get to the final plan, it's something that we can all agree on, rather than the risk at the moment is we come up with something that actually we can't all agree on, which will further undermine people's confidence in us to deliver the affordable housing which is so badly needed throughout our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I take it that you would continue to ask for the 3 items to be taken in separately?
I would, please. Thank you.
No trouble at all. Thank you very much indeed. I'd remind members that the recommendation isn't just what is on the page in front of us. It is that the Housing and Communities Committee are requested to recommend these items to the CPCA board, as well as the instruction being given to the chief executives to inform MHCLG of the recommendation before the deadline of March the 17th. The first amendment is to item 1, and it's the inclusion of the words subject to full and public disclosure of all communication between MHCLG and or ministers with the CPCA and or the Mayor regarding the £100 million affordable housing programme. I will now ask each committee member in turn alphabetically if they agree with the recommendation. Please unmute your microphone to respond. This is agreeing with the amendment number 1 put forward by Councillor Smith. Councillor Steve Allen.
I'm against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, against. Councillor Mike Davey.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Against.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
For.
Thank you. I wonder if member services could just confirm, Democratic Services could confirm that that is 3 in favour and 4 against.
That's correct.
Thank you. That first part of the amendment is lost. The second amendment is item 4, new item, request that the board urgently commission a full independent audit of the £100 million affordable housing programme. Again, I'll ask each committee member in turn if they agree with the recommendation. Councillor Steve Allen.
Against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, against. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
For.
Thank you. If Democratic Services can confirm, that's 2 in favour and 5 against.
That's correct.
Thank you. That part of the amendment is lost. And finally, that a detailed report be brought back to an emergency meeting of the Housing Committee within the next 4 weeks to include a plan of how the affordable housing allocation can be maximised and fully secured, and including a timeline for future delivery. Again, I'll ask each committee member in turn, and this is for the amendment item number 5. Councillor Steve Allen.
I'm against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Councillor Chris Bowden, myself, against. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan Fuller.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
For.
Thank you. By my count, that is 2 in favour and 5 against. I wonder if I may have confirmation of that.
That's correct.
Thank you very much indeed. That amendment is therefore defeated. We move on to discussion of the main motion, the original motion, substantive motion. And again, anyone who spoke in the amendment to the amendment is perfectly entitled to speak again to the main motion. Does anyone wish to start off the discussion? Since no one's raising their hands, I'll start. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm very happy for you to go first if you want to, Chair.
I thought, well, that's very kind of you, Councillor Smith. I thought it was only fair just to give the outline of what it is that we are now talking about. And that is that we approve to the CPCA board these revised proposals for the future delivery and completion of the £100 million affordable housing programme, which are outlined in paragraph 3.3, which we've been talking about, with all the conditions that are attached therein. And that secondly, and importantly, we note the change in arrangements that there's going to be for the operation and completion of the £70 million Cambridge City housing programme, which will no longer be part of the CPCA programme at all, but will be completely independent and controlled directly by Cambridge City Housing, together with the transfer of funds to that fund. And then finally, that we are instructing the chief executives to inform MHCLG of the recommendation as agreed in time for the deadline, which has been set by MHCLG, and to bring forward a report to the board, the arrangements for the implementation of the revised scheme once we have it. That is what is being proposed. I just thought it was helpful to outline that. Councillor Smith first.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have quite a few questions. Do you want me to do the whole lot as a block, or because it might get...
It depends whom you're asking the questions to, but it's much easier to take questions one by one. And I'm more than happy to take as many questions as you have. I may not be the right person to answer them in every case. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Okay. So the £40 million loan scheme by my calculation, has funded 53 affordable homes, with most of the money actually going to provide market homes, which obviously, obviously benefits people who buy those homes, but also benefits the developers. So my understanding is that MHCLG are essentially winding up the £40 million loan programme, and there will be, this is a rhetorical question, there will be no more loans for affordable housing or market housing coming out of the combined authority. So I'd just like some confirmation of that. And
right. Let's take one question at a time, if you don't mind. It's going to be much easier for me, if you don't mind. The number isn't 53, it's 55, but apart from that tiny difference, your understanding is entirely correct.
Thank you. And am I correct in saying that there will be no more loans coming out?
Entirely correct.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to refer on now to the £100,000 house programme. So am I right in assuming that this essentially is the end of the £100,000 house programme, because that was dependent on the £100 million affordable housing programme?
I think I shall ask officers to assist on this. My understanding is it's not the end of the programme, but maybe the end of the funding for the programme at this time. But officers may be able to elucidate or even correct me on that matter. Roger or Robert or
I'm happy to take that,
Roger,
Chair.
thank you.
Yes, so insofar as 100k homes have been funded through loans with local SME developers, obviously that will now need to come to an end. We will complete the existing 5 loan programme, and then we will not be doing any more loans through a revolving fund for that purpose. The programme itself is looking, I think, for developers to bring 100k homes forward through the planning process. And then there is the question, of course, of any other funding route that the combined authority might be able to consider to support 100k homes.
Thank you, Roger. That's very helpful. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Thompson. It would be, just thinking ahead, I do think this committee might like to see a plan for how the £100,000 house programme might continue, rather than just wind up. And I certainly would like to see how much that has cost this authority, to get the scheme up and running, so we can make a judgment about whether that's delivered value for money as well.
Councillor Smith, I believe that we'd all like to see what the plans are to take it further, and I'm sure that will be brought forward at the earliest possible opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Shall I let somebody else come in, and then may I come?
No. You're unless you're getting tired, you're more than welcome to carry on. Once you get into your stride, you might as well continue.
Okay, where I'm monopolising this. So I need more explanation over the value for money. So we have in the original pack Appendix 2. Have MHCLG seen Appendix 2, please? And could we have some sort of explanation about why MHCLG do not believe that this scheme has delivered their desired level of value for money, please?
Well, it's a bit difficult for any of us to answer on behalf of MHCLG. As far as the average grant rate is concerned, for those projects approved up to the 31st of March 2021, with the loss of the Northstowe units, of course, which we can't count in those numbers anymore, the average grant rate will be £35,624 per unit, which includes the inclusion of the 55 units coming for nothing from the loan book. For the those projects that the committee has already approved that will deliver in the year 21-22 have an average grant rate of £40,700. This compares with the benchmark figure that government appears to be talking about, as far as we're concerned, of £45,000. As for what the MHCLG's motivation may be, I cannot give any answer at all about that, but I wonder if any officers either have information or speculation which they may be able to share with the committee so far as that's concerned.
The only information I think I can share is that We did supply the final draft of our value for money assessment to MHCLG a couple of weeks ago, and we haven't had any reply or response or comment back on that yet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Smith.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Could I also have sort of clarification over what we think MHCLG want to happen with repaid loan money, because again, that's not entirely clear to me. And also, we heard, I think at the last time we looked at this, that COVID was going to have a serious negative impact on the rate at which those loans, we expected those loans to be repaid. So we're expecting the money to, I think we've renegotiated all of the loans thus far. So, we are not expecting the money back in as quickly as we had anticipated. So, how do we think MHCLG want us to use that money, and what is the realistic time frame going to be for using repaid loans in light of all the problems we have resulting from COVID?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's one question I can answer definitively on behalf of MHCLG. They have made it completely clear that they want to see any monies which are returned, any loan monies which are returned during the course of 21-22 to be allocated first and foremost to the remainder of the programme that we are going to be fulfilling in 21-22. And they've made that completely and abundantly clear. So far as
Can I add to that, please? Yeah, I think.
Of course you may. Yes.
Thank you. And to help Councillor Smith as well, I think where there is uncertainty, and it's one of the questions we will be asking of MHCLG, is what happens to loan repayments money post March 2022? And that's one of the ones that we don't have clarity on, Councillor Smith. And of course, we'll be seeking that as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. You are, of course, entirely correct. I was only looking at 21-22, not what the situation would be beyond. And we've received no notification from MHCLG whatsoever about what the situation would be post 31st March 2022. As far as the amounts are concerned, and the fact that COVID-19 had caused some difficulties, which we've discussed and agreed previously, officers have, as you can imagine, in the last few working days, been working very hard indeed to try and evaluate what sort of numbers there may be. I don't believe any conclusion had been reached the last time I spoke, but Mr. Thompson may be able to tell me that they've now completed that exercise, or it may still be an ongoing one.
Chair, I can confirm there's an ongoing exercise, but I would refer as a general sort of line of sight to the graph in the later report on the 100 million housing programme, which shows the projection that we were expecting for the repayment of the loans. And we're expecting towards the end of next year, the March 2022 deadline, for there to be 24 to 25 million pounds of the loans that are not yet repaid, which will mean we have something in the region of 12 to 15 million repaid during the course of between now and March 2022. That's the current projection with that. That is subject to any update and clarification, but I think it's a fair guide.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Thompson. Councillor Smith.
Thank you for your tolerance. So thinking back to all those years ago when the devolution deal was signed, so at that time it was sold to the previous administration at South Cambridgeshire. Really, the thing that tipped the balance over whether to agree to have a devolution deal was the housing money, the £100 million affordable housing money. And at that time, we were led to believe that that money would be allocated according to need, and need being manifest by affordability. So in the Greater Cambridge area, we have the greatest problems around affordability. Now, that's not really how it's panned out. That's not how the money has been spent. I think Huntingdonshire have had virtually nothing. I've had a wee bit, but I've had big problems trying to persuade registered social landlords to use the combined authority route rather than use the Homes England route, because they found the combined authority route very complex. So I haven't had much. Obviously, there's been lots and lots of housing in Peterborough, which I think has benefited from having lots and lots of brownfield sites. But what my ask is that when we are reviewing how we move forward, if we have any money to move forward with, can we please revisit what some of us believed was the original purpose of this money, to provide affordable housing in those areas where housing was least affordable, please?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I think it's perfectly reasonable that when this matter comes to the next Housing Committee, that matter is specifically laid out for discussion. It has to be said that some of us have had a different interpretation, that it's where there has been the lack of viability of affordable housing that the money has been meant to have been allocated. But it's an entirely appropriate thing for us to discuss, and I will make sure that it's included in the report which comes to the next Housing Committee on this matter. Is that the end of your questions? Excellent, thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Davey, sorry to have kept you waiting. Councillor Davey, you're on mute.
Forgive me, Councillor Button. That's fine. I was glad. I was going to ask one or two questions about the loans, but I think they've been covered off now, so I won't repeat or reiterate the questions already. And I think it's only right that I should just make a note of the last bullet point in that section around the Cambridge City Council housing allocation and how that will be done in future. I think it's my understanding that there's still, I'm sure Mr Thompson will be able to confirm this, I think there's still, £10 million to come from the CPCA, and I suspect Mrs Bryant will be in touch to have that allocation. I suppose my question, I've got two questions to be quite honest, Councillor Bowden. The first is around, it's links to Councillor Smith's last question. It's really, how many homes have we lost? How many affordable homes have been lost as a result of this? And is it disproportionately impacted? So Councillor Smith referred to Huntingdonshire in particular. And I suppose it's just to be clear about how that's planned out, and then probably more importantly, how we're going to address that in the future, because clearly it's important that we do pick up anything that's lost now, and so therefore the CPCA can then deliver in the future. And the second question, so there's only two, Councillor Bowden, so if I crack on, it's bearing in mind the MHCLG's level of involvement now in the programme. What is the space for local accountability? So it seems almost odd that as a result of this process, there is now increased bureaucracy going to be addressing the CPCA's house building programme, which must be of deep frustration to all concerns. But nonetheless, there still needs to be some sort of local accountability, and presumably it'll be through this committee. But it's just, how is that going to be done so we're not replicating and duplicating everything in future? So thank you, Councillor Bowden. Those are my two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. First of all, you ask how many homes are lost. We don't know whether there will be any homes lost which otherwise would have been built. We don't yet know that. Until the discussions take place between the civil servants involved and our joint chief executives, we won't know exactly what the new arrangements are going to be. It is possible that some schemes that we have at the moment may not be approved by the civil servants, and they'll say that they don't regard them as being value for money, in which case those obviously will not go ahead. But we actually don't know yet. And until we get that report back from officers after agreement has been reached with MHCLG, it would be pure speculation. On the most optimistic reading of the situation, everything which we had previously approved, whether we'd approved it unconditionally or we'd approved it conditionally based on the availability of funds, on the most optimistic interpretation, all of those schemes will be going ahead, apart from two which have dropped out for a different reason entirely. That's the most optimistic version. It may not be as good as that. And it would be rash of me to speculate what the final result is going to be, but I do have a great deal of trust in our joint chief executives that they will get the best possible deal out of this so far as the arrangements with MHCLG are concerned. I wouldn't want to talk about any disproportionate impact because I actually don't know the answer to that. And again, that's something we'll be able to look at more, better if and when necessary at our next meeting. As for local accountability, well, you've made a very, very good point there. And it does come to the heart of the old question about whether devolution is actually supported by the whole government machine. And it can be argued that there are those within the government machine who do not like the fact that decisions have been taken away from them and have been given to localities. And let's be quite honest, it's not merely in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that things like this are happening at the moment. Oxfordshire are facing very much the same issues with very much the same sorts of conditions involved. And that's just for one. So you are completely correct. There is a real tension here between local accountability and central control and holding the purse strings. And I don't think this should be a matter of party politics, but I think that there is that fundamental difference between those who believe that decisions are better made at a local level and those who believe that decisions are better made at the centre. Thank you for that, for those questions. If there are no other speakers, then may I put this agenda item, the revised paper 2.1, to the vote, please. The recommendations are to approve the revised proposals for the future delivery and completion of the £100 million affordable housing programme, as outlined in paragraph 3.3, to note the revised arrangements for the operation and completion of the £70 million Cambridge City housing programme, and to instruct the chief executives to inform MHCLG of the recommendation as agreed, and to bring forward a report to the board, the arrangements for the implementation for the revised scheme. And all of these things are also just being recommended to the board of CPCA for discussion there. Councillor Smith, do you want to speak first?
Just to ask if we could take the vote in 3 separate votes on those recommendations, please.
Procedurally, I don't see why not. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Yes, Chair. We have 2 3.3s, Chair.
We do indeed. You're entirely correct.
Apologies, Chairman. I didn't spot that. And those people who read it didn't spot it. So thank you, Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Well, it's good to know that one of us, at least on the committee, has got their eyes open, even if the rest of us didn't manage to see it. So well done. And of course, we are talking about the first lot of 3.3s as far as that's concerned. Right. Councillor Smith has requested that this be taken in parts, each of the 3 recommendations. Happy to do that. So I'll ask each committee member in turn alphabetically if they agree with the recommendation, which is in agenda item 2.1 as revised. First of all, the approval of the proposals for the future delivery and completion of the £100 million affordable housing programme. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor Chris Bowden, myself, for. Councillor Mike Davey.
Abstain.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
I apologise, for.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Against.
Thank you. By my reckoning, that was 5 in favour, 1 abstention and 1 against. If
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. So item 1 is carried. Item 2, to note the revised arrangements for the operation and completion of the £70 million Cambridge City housing programme. Again, I'll ask each committee member in turn. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, for. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
And Councillor Bridget Smith.
For.
Thank you, that's unanimous. And finally, that we instruct the chief executives to inform the MHCLG of the recommendation as agreed and bring forward a report to the board for the recommendations, for the arrangements for the implementation of the revised scheme. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor Chris Bowden, myself, for. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Abstain.
Thank you. By my count, that is 6 in favour and 1 abstention.
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. That part is carried, so all of the 3 recommendations are carried. Thank you very much indeed, members, for your patience and your perseverance during that particular item. My apologies, the meeting is now running half an hour late, but I felt it was really important that everyone was given the maximum amount of time necessary in order to explore all of the items which we had in front of us. Agenda item 2. Does anyone need to have a comfort break yet? Or if not, we'll happily go on. If anyone desperately needs one, please indicate. No one indicating? Good. Okay, agenda item 2.2. This is on pages 41 to 70 of our pack, and it's the £70 million Cambridge City Council affordable housing update. And I believe we have Claire Flowers here today. Or is this being presented by Roger?
She was here a moment ago.
I know.
Oh no, Fiona. Could we let Rhiannon? Could we let Fiona in, please? Fiona Bryant, please.
She's just been promoted.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Fiona.
She can hear us.
Fiona, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much indeed. Are you able to introduce the £70 million Cambridge City Council affordable housing update item on 2.2?
I am, and thank you. I promise I will be brief. Just to say thank you for inviting me to the committee today. As you're aware, when we present our update reports, it slightly depends on the timing for our Housing Scrutiny Committee as to how up to date your reports are. Sadly, our Housing Scrutiny Committee on this occasion is tomorrow. The dates haven't fitted very well, so you have an old report there. So I just give a brief update. As you'll also be aware, we've been working extremely hard with Roger to try and ensure where possible we can bring forward as many starts on site, which is the target for the programme, before March 21, owing to the concerns raised by MHCLG about the end date for the programme, which we all believed was March 2022. I'm very pleased to be able to announce that we have met the programme target in the city. We have 130 homes now completed, of which 75 are new council homes, and a total start on site of 451 we will have by next Monday, which means that we have a total 526 affordable homes, or council rented homes in this case, starting on site before the end of March 2021. Members will note that from previous reports that we were expecting 540 starts on site. We have one site at Clark Maxwell Road where we are still just finalising a contract issue, but we expect to start in April. But obviously we have already met the more than 500 target. We also have two revised small schemes at Tedder Way and Kendall Way, where we had boundary disputes, so we have now changed those. We will continue to go through the tribunal system on the boundary disputes, but we have changed those to single accessible homes, and those were approved through our January Housing Scrutiny Committee. And in terms of just mentioning the modular pods for to support the homeless, we have 6 units have been handed over at King's Hedges. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Fiona. That's extremely helpful. If any member has any question or comment to make, would they please raise their virtual hand? No one? Okay. We asked to note two things. The first is to note the report and the spends and outputs for the £70 million programme, which I'm sure that no one will object to. If anyone does object to that, please do indicate. Thank you. No one indicates, so we note the report. But we're told that the next report will be provided to the next Housing Committee meeting. And I wonder if officers could give some guidance as to whether that is now appropriate, given the instructions that have now been given by MHCLG.
Shall I answer that, Chair? I think my understanding, based on the instructions from MHCLG, is that this will be the last report on the 70 million programme, and we won't be having a further report at any further meeting.
Thank you. Then we will restrict ourselves just to noting this report. Thank you very much indeed, Roger, and thank you, members. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 2.3, which is the update report on the North East Cambridge programme. And Fiona, it's your stage again.
It is, thank you very much. Roger suggested that since it's quite a long time now since we presented a report on this programme, that it might be worth me providing a short presentation, and I believe Tamar has that, hopefully can bring up for me. I will whiz through this quite quickly. Next slide, please. So this is just to remind people generally where the North East Cambridge area, full area sits. And as you can see, it's just south of the A14, north of the city, and encompasses to its east end the Cambridge North Station through the guided busway, obviously goes through it in a highly sustainable location and a brownfield site. Thank you. Next slide, please. Just to remind members that it includes 182 hectares of brownfield land, about a short cycle ride away from the city centre, and only 55 minutes to London via Cambridge North. Obviously, the whole of the area includes the Cambridge Science Park, St John's Innovation Park, Cambridge Business Park, and obviously the area covered or currently where Cambridge Regional College is located. The plan for the programme for the North East Cambridge development will help unlock investment in infrastructure innovation and economic growth, and obviously along the Greater Cambridge area or within the Greater Cambridge area, as well as the Cambridge end of the Oxford to Cambridge Tech Corridor, which is highly important and a very important priority for government. And the development will also make a significant contribution to meeting the national planning priority framework or planning framework priorities, and of course, as has been spoken about in the last item, the housing needs, particularly of the Greater Cambridge area, where average house prices are more than 13 times average salaries. So the affordability is incredibly important. The intention is to create an integrated economy that meets the needs of people living and working there. And the vision for North East Cambridge is to be inclusive, walkable, low carbon, a new city district with a lively mix of homes and workplaces, etc. Next slide, please. So this is just a sort of diagrammatical version. At the moment, you do have a number of jobs within the sites, very much employment site at the moment. Only 3 or very small number of homes owing to the odour zone that is currently surrounds the water treatment plant owned by Anglian Water that is currently located in the middle of that area. And the potential is obviously for upwards of 8,000 homes across the area, homes for 18,000 residents, of which 40% will be affordable. The diagram currently suggests 10 hectares of public parks and squares. That doesn't actually include the areas that are already open space on the Science Park, for instance, or the open space that is likely to be included within the courtyards of housing units and housing schemes. So the future draft of the area action plan is likely to increase that number considerably. Next slide, please. I thought it was important just to give a bit of a timeline for this. Obviously, the relocation of the water treatment plant is required in order to enable the housing to come forward. So at the moment, we're obviously sitting in 2021. We have secured the HIF grant funding supported by the Combined Authority. The draft AAP, Area Action Plan, has been out for consultation. And we plan to go out later this year to start the consultation on the concepts for the core site development, the core site being 48 hectares in the middle of the area action plan, which is jointly owned by Anglian Water and the City Council. But as you can see, in terms of actually moving forward, the first homes are likely to be able to be occupied not until 2028, when the full relocation has occurred for the water treatment plant. Next slide, please. It's a very complex programme, as you can imagine, but to try and simplify it, we've divided it into 3 projects. Broadly, those are the planning framework from the North East Cambridge Area Action Plan, which will sit as part of the emerging local plan, the Cambridge Wastewater Treatment Plant Relocation Project, and the core site development project. And I'll just give a very brief update on those three. Next slide, please. So in terms of the area action plan, as I say, it provides the planning framework for the new quarter. It obviously spans across local authorities, in particular the South Cambs and ourselves. It's a local planning authority project led by the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service, and they issued a draft consultation report which had been approved through South Cambs and the city processes in the summer of 2020. That's the Regulation 18 consultation report. The consultation ran through the summer and autumn of last year, and they did a lot of work on putting that out in a digital format owing to the pandemic, and they received over 4,000 responses, and the planning team are currently still going through those responses and reviewing them, and will be reporting back later this year to both South Cambs and City committees and decision-making processes with their Regulation 19 report, which is the final report or the final copy of the action plan, which will subsequently be due for submission for inspection and adoption. Just to say, there's a slight difference to the norm, and just to explain, I've said at the bottom of that slide that the Regulation 19 draft will then effectively sit on the shelf. In this particular programme, the complication is that the planning service will need to be able to submit a document which is what's described as deliverable to the inspector, and what that means is that they need to have certainty around the fact that the water treatment plant will be moved and will enable the preferred option for the new district to be put forward as part of that Reg 19 draft. That will depend on the outcome of the development consent order, which is the planning permission for the relocation of the water treatment plant, and therefore those two are intertwined, as it were. And at this point in time, the development consent order requires the area action plan to have got to Reg 19 draft to underpin the need for the relocation to happen. And the area action plan requires the DCO consent to prove its deliverability. So effectively, that's why the AAP will have to wait until the DCO is determined before it comes forward. Next slide, please. Project 2 is the wastewater treatment plant relocation from its current location at Cowley Road. This is led by Anglian Water. It's required to enable the development of the sustainable brownfield site in northeast Cambridge. As I've described, the planning process or the planning route through which that will achieve permission to relocate will be via development consent order. This is a nationally determined consent. It requires what is described as a Section 35 application to be approved in order for it to be accepted for a development consent order, and that has been approved by DEFRA, and therefore the project is considered as a national infrastructure project of strategic importance, and therefore it can go forward for DCO consent. The relocation project is funded by the Housing Infrastructure Fund programme. As you'll be aware, £227 million was approved, and that does fund that relocation rather than any subsequent development. The Anglian Water have completed their first consultation last summer, autumn, and they announced their preferred relocation site in January, at the end of January this year. They are currently now working further on design and engaging with the key stakeholders for that preferred site. And the next consultation stage is due in June this year, with a third one being due in early 2022. Following that, they will be submitting the development consent order, as long as it's all concluded, later on in 2022, with the expectation of a determination by the inspector in 23 or early 24. Thank you. Next slide, please. I thought it was worth just raising one particular issue about the Housing Infrastructure Fund, which members I think will be aware of, but just wanted to confirm. In previous allocations of housing infrastructure funding, effectively the funding has been a grant. At this time, government were very keen to see if they could potentially recover as much funding as they possibly could that they were giving out to allow some sort of revolving fund possibly for the future. So at this stage in time, we have agreed of up to 227 million agreed to fund the relocation project. That will be carried forward, and at some point we will agree a maximum sum that the actual project will cost as it goes forward. That funding, the HIF funding, is to enable about 8,000 homes with a target of 5,600 on the core site, which is the site at the heart of the area. So the HIF was set against the 5,600. We have some fairly hard stop key milestones for achievement, and it's important that we continue to progress all three projects to make sure that we meet those. The funding has to be all spent by March 28. That has been extended by government from the original dates, but that is a hard stop date now. And the provision for the recycling is currently that that any consideration of land value uplift beyond the inclusion of all costs for the site will be taken into account, and some development management return for landowners and the master developer. But beyond that, if there is any additional surplus from land value uplift, that should be paid over to the combined authority, and Homes England hold or will hold an agreement with the combined authority for that to be reinvested in housing in the future. Just a couple of quick key points. I think the expectations of the new district, assuming that all permissions allow it to go forward, are quite high in terms of focus on investment on climate change, on net zero carbon development, on ensuring that it meets future needs of people who live, work and want to spend time there. And therefore, I think we don't yet know what the expectations of any surplus, if there is any, will be. And secondly, to say that I have mentioned that the first time that we are likely to be able to occupy housing at the earliest is 2028. This is a long-term project, and the development term is going on until around 2040. So the expectation of any recycling funding coming forward within the next few years is unlikely, because it's unlikely that we will be able to cover the costs until obviously mid that development term. So this is a very long-term project. Next slide, please. Just briefly on project 3, the core site development, this is the one that is just really starting. You received the report, which was about the emerging business plan. To remind members that the core site is right at the middle of the AAP and sits currently where the water treatment plant is. Next slide, please. Is it possible to scroll that down a bit? And this is just showing it as in regards to slightly more of the setting around how it fits with the rest of the city and the rest of the AAP, and its position in
Fiona, are you still there? I fear that we may have lost Fiona. Just give a few seconds in case she comes back.
She's still on the participants list, Councillor Bowden.
She is still there, but we're not hearing her at all, unfortunately. Yes. And she's not on mute, so it looks as though there may have been a problem at her end.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a shame because I certainly had a question or two. And in fact, it may be able to be answered by Councillor Davey or Councillor Smith. I just wondered, of the 8,000, I can see where the 6,400 are. Of the 8,000, the other 1,600 homes, how many of those would be in South Cambs rather than being in Cambridge City?
Oh, golly, haven't got that information at my fingertips, I'm afraid, but I will get it circulated to members.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you indeed, Councillor Smith. Unfortunately, we still don't have Fiona back. Does anyone else have any comment or question they'd care to make? No? Just raise your hand. No? In which case, I take it that we are happy to approve this report. Oh, no, we're being asked to note it. So we should note the report and note the presentation. I see no objection to doing so. And I'd like to thank Fiona for her presentation on this report and on the previous one as well. Moving on to agenda item 2.4, which is on pages 145 to 160 of the pack, and that is the £100 million Affordable Housing Programme update. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Much of this report has been superseded by the output from MHCLG and report item 2.1. However, there are some items in there I'd just like to highlight to members, and we also wish to request a release of some funding for one scheme. So if I can just go into the report under sections 5.3 and 5.4, we have the schemes that are most recently approved at the last committee. We also have two schemes that have been withdrawn since the last committee. One scheme is because there was a land ownership issue. The other scheme is because they're taking funding through one of the subsidiaries of the joint venture, Evra. We now, of course, need to add to that the Mayor Fen scheming units, so the £260,000 that was provisionally allocated to Mayor Fen will now be returning as a scheme withdrawal into the
regards Cambridge North Station, for example, what it potentially might look like in future. Next slide.
Fiona, my apologies. I'm afraid you have cut out for the last 4 or 5 minutes, and we have moved on to our next agenda item.
Oh, sorry.
I do apologise. I think we all found the presentation very interesting. The one question I did have was how many of the 8,000 homes outside the core area, how many of those other 1,600 are in the South Cambridgeshire District Council area?
I think, well, so far, probably about half of them or so, we believe, are coming forward outside of the city. Half of the at least 1,400 will be coming forward, we believe, in South Cambridgeshire, but it's very early days yet for all of those.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies that the technology let us down, but I think we were all very interested by the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roger, sorry.
Sorry, no problem, Chelsea. Technology intervening there. So just going back, so we had the schemes approved at last committee in 5.3. We've had effectively 2 scheme withdrawals and then a further one now with Mayor Fen under 5.4. In connection with the loan book and progress with that, generally speaking, the loan book is going as we anticipated and reported to board back in August. There was a particular focus around some of the market sales ahead of what was going to be the March end of stamp duty deadline. I am aware that there are some transactions in the next 2 or 3 weeks that should be completing in terms of the sale of market units, but equally some of the urgency around that has now gone as a result of the Chancellor moving his deadline back by 3 months. So we can expect to continue, hopefully, to see market sales and therefore the return of some of our capital through the loan book. In connection with what we're asking committee to approve, under Appendix 4, there were 2 schemes in the papers that we were asking committee to release the funding for, which were previously conditional papers in terms of the release of that funding. One of those schemes we've now been advised will not be starting on site before the end of this month. That is the scheme at the top of the schedule, which is the British Sugar Waste site in Peterborough. So we're now not requesting the release of that funding. They've had some issues, I think, with their Section 38 and 1 or 2 other technical issues that they won't be starting this month. But we are still requesting the release unconditional release of the sum of £749,000 for the HDC sites phase 2, which was a previously conditional approval, and we're requesting the release of that funding. And I think I'll take questions from there, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Roger. I appreciate that quite a bit of this report is now superseded by what we've previously been discussing. But if any member has any question or comment to make on anything in this report, please do raise your hand. Nope. No questions. Roger, thank you very much indeed. So we're being asked to do two things. First of all, to note the progress of delivery of the £100 million affordable housing programme, and secondly, to approve the prioritisation and release of existing funds on further schemes as laid out, other than the British Sugar Scheme. Do any members object to that, those proposals? If not, then I'll take that as being agreed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Roger. Move on next to agenda item 2.51, which is the £100 million affordable housing programme HALO portfolio. And Asma, I believe that you will be introducing this item. We do have some exempt appendices within this report. And if anyone wishes to discuss anything within the exempt appendix, I'd be very grateful if you'd indicate now, and we will, if necessary, go into private session. Otherwise, we can conduct this business in public. Asma.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Right, I'll start with the HALO. It has 4 sites that they're presenting to us today for Housing Committee. They're in Bayards Plaza, Peterborough, Alconbury Weald, in Hunts, Pemberton Park, East Cambs, and Judith Gardens, also in HDC Hunts. All units will be shared ownership. There is 60 in total. There's a minor error in the paper. Bayards Plaza has 38 2-beds. There's a little error in the paper saying there's 14 2-beds and the calculations are slightly off. So there's 16 2-beds rather than 14 as mentioned. All units will be for local people. I've spoken to all the local authorities in question. All of them have been giving their support for those units. The grant that they're requesting is £2,168,625. All these units are already started on site and near completion in some cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Asma. Does any member have any comment or question? No, I will put that to the vote. I will ask just if anyone objects to this proposal or wishes to abstain. Sorry, Councillor Davey. Councillor Davey.
Councillor Bowden. Sorry, Councillor Bowden, can you hear me okay? It's an
yes,
abstention. It's an abstention.
Then I will call the vote if you don't mind. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden, for. Councillor Mike Davey.
Abstention.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Abstention.
Thank you. I make that 5 in favour and 2 abstentions, if that is correct.
Correct.
Thank you very much indeed. That is therefore agreed. Thank you very much indeed, members. We can now move on to agenda item 2.52, which is on pages 167 to 172, which is the Alconbury Weald Rent Plus proposal. Again, Asma, please.
Thank you, Chair. Right, Rent Plus Rent Plus have come to us with units at Alconbury Weald. These units are opposite our old Alconbury office. They are over and above the Section 106 requirements in the area. All these units are bigger than NDSS. These are 10-year conversions, so they are going from market to rent to buy products through the Rent Plus procedures. Tenants will move in on a fixed rent term basis between 5 to 20 years, and they will be saving up for a deposit as well as paying rent. Tenants will move into the unit with a 5-year fixed period, and during that time, Rent Plus says that they will pay towards services and charges and ground rent, whereas the applicant will then pay an affordable rent. They are allowed to purchase the home that they are acquired to stay in. Rent Plus will also be able to give them a 10% cash deposit, which enables them to go to any high street lender to get a mortgage on a shared ownership product. The RP that will be maintaining the properties on behalf of Rent Plus are Catalyst, and I've ensured that contact with Rent Plus and HDC Hunts have been encouraged, so they will come together to provide a common local lettings policy to ensure local people are able to acquire these units. The applicant will pay 80% of market rent or local housing allowance, whichever is lower. 22 units have been gained at the Oldcombury site with a grant request of 989,325. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Asma. Are there any questions? There are some. Councillor David Ambrose-Smith first, please.
Just a point of clarification, please, Chair. Regarding this is coming from the £100 million affordable housing programme, which is no longer in existence now. Should we be wording it? Should this not be worded in a different way?
I believe you'll find that this actually covers, it is counted in this year's allocation because the properties are available and before the 31st of March.
That is correct, Councillor.
So that's why it is actually worded correctly, but it was a good spot that it could have been wrong.
Yeah, all these units are actually present and available and will have already started on site before the end of March 2021.
Thank you. Does that say so in the report?
I may have missed that.
Okay,
I may have missed that.
Thank you.
I had quite a few problems with my computer at the time, so I do apologise if it's not in there.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Asma. Bridget.
Thank you. So I welcome the fact that all these units exceed the national design space standards, and some of them actually exceed them by some considerable amount. And so I've consistently voted against combined authority money being used for housing which doesn't meet these standards. And so this is exactly what we should be doing, supporting high quality homes for our residents. So I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Asma, just a quick question. You mentioned that these will be available for a locality base, i.e. there's a locality tick list, I'm assuming, that people have to qualify for. Would that be applicable for people that are moving to the area to work?
I'm hoping so, if that's part of the local lettings plan. So if somebody's got employment within the area and they are able to prove that, then they should get some sort of connection to the area and be able to apply for the accommodation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, members. We are being asked to commit grant funding of £989,325 from the £100 million affordable housing programme for the delivery of 22 additional affordable homes at Alconbury Weald. I will go through the list of committee members in alphabetical order. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose-Smith.
For.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden. For. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
For.
That was a unanimous vote in favour of the recommendation. Thank you very much indeed, members. The next item, we've almost finished on the agenda, is agenda item 2.6, the update on community land trusts and 100k homes. Again, some of it slightly superseded by some of our previous discussions. I see, Emily, that you're here, and I wonder if you will be kind enough to take this forward.
Yep, so thank you, Chair. Members should have the update on community land trusts and 100k homes in front of them. So some of the key updates from community land trusts since the previous committee meeting are that Haddenham Community Land Trust have now completed on their first phase of CLT homes in the village and welcomed their first tenants into those homes. which has been great to see. We have a newly incorporated CLT in Little Thetford, and they recently held a successful public launch via Zoom, which is obviously a bit of a new experience, and we'll begin to collect community members going forward. And Great Shelford parochial charities are due to start on site imminently at Moors Meadow, which will provide 21 affordable homes for the community. In terms of 100k homes, our main update for you at this meeting is that we have undertaken a formal evaluation of the allocations policy, and the allocations policy worked very well. We were very pleased with how smoothly it worked. There are 2 small amendments that we are asking members to approve. Firstly, a slight glitch in the point system, whereby applicants who currently lived in the relevant area, so in this case was Fordham, if they had previously lived in one of the surrounding areas, there were no points allocated for previously living in a surrounding parish. This meant that someone that had lived in the surrounding parish for 5 years would actually score more than someone that currently lived in the relevant parish, but for the 4 years prior had lived in a surrounding parish. So we've looked to amend that. And the second amendment is to clarify that joint applicants must submit, anyone intending to buy the 100k home jointly must submit a joint application. They can't submit 2 single applications. And happy to take any questions on any of that.
Thank you very much indeed. Do any members have any comments or questions, please? Oh, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So, we heard earlier on today that, the £100,000 home scheme is at an end, and that, an alternative way of delivering these houses needs to be worked up. So we have absolutely no certainty that there will be any more £100,000 homes in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I don't want to negate the work that's gone into this, but how many £100,000 homes are there which are going to complete, for which tenants have not been, purchasers have not been found? What are the numbers? What are the total numbers of £100,000 homes completed? How many will be completed? And how many of those, how many are we still looking for purchasers for?
Emily, are you able to help with that?
Yeah, so we've currently got 3 further 100k home schemes on site. 2 schemes will come forward later this year. They are in Ely and Great Abington, and they're both delivering 400k homes each. And then the 3rd scheme is expected to complete in 2022, and that is in Cambridge City, just on Histon Road, and that's another 4 units, I believe. Although Roger, please do correct me if I'm wrong. As far, there's been 8 completed 100k homes, and those are all on the Rayners Green site in Fordham.
Thank you, Emily. Just to point out, Bridget, the 100k home programme isn't finished. It's just that its most obvious funding source is not going to be continuing. And there is a hope that we will find some other alternative funding source or an alternative method for carrying the programme forward.
Okay.
Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I can just ask a quick question. You say you've got 3 that are currently available. Are they all also at Rayners?
No, sorry, I meant 3 further schemes to come forward, which are the Ely scheme, the Great Abington scheme, and the Histon Road scheme.
Right.
Sorry, that was worded slightly wrong.
Ah, right. So you're not sitting at this moment in time, because I thought your answer to Councillor Smith said that you had 3 empty 100k homes waiting for.
No, there are no empty 100. Well, there are no 100k homes yet to be allocated.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That supersedes my second part of my question. Then, thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. If there are no further questions, may I ask if anyone wishes to either oppose or abstain on the proposals that we note the update provided in this report and that we approve the 2 amendments to the 100k homes allocation policy. If anyone wishes either to abstain or to vote against, would they let me know now, please?
I'm going to abstain on this.
Then we'll have a vote then. Just to emphasise, it's to note the update provided in this report and to approve the 2 amendments to the allocations policy. Councillor Steve Allen.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose-Smith.
For.
Myself, Councillor Chris Bowden. For. Councillor Mike Davey.
For.
Councillor Ryan Fuller.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
And Councillor Bridget Smith.
Same.
Thank you. I make that 6 in favour and 1 abstention.
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. The resolutions are carried. Thank you very much. Now move forward to agenda item 2.7, which is on pages 189 to 202 of your pack, and that is the Oakington Community Land Trust Startup Grant Allocation. And Emily, I wonder if you can help us again with this one, please.
Yeah. So Oakington Community Land Trust Steering Group, they have been in existence for a couple of years at this point. They've spent the last couple of years having some initial conversations with officers at South Cambs District Council. They are aware of a potential piece of land in their village and have been talking to the landowner, and they've had some early conversations with a potential development partner. What they're looking to do is to bring forward housing for the elderly population in Oakington and the surrounding villages in a community-led fashion and with lots of associated facilities, open green space, and facilities that can be opened up to the wider community as well, so that there's a strong integration between the older members of older residents and the wider village. So having undertaken all of that initial work, they're now seeking a grant of £5,000 to set themselves up as a legally incorporated community land trust, and to take the next steps in terms of community engagement and undertaking a more formal housing needs assessment.
Thank you very much indeed, Emily. Do any members have any comments or questions to make on this agenda item? No one? May I then ask if anyone wishes to abstain or to vote against this? Would they just indicate, please? Otherwise, I will take it that it is agreed unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, members. Agenda item 2.8 has been withdrawn, and that therefore concludes the meeting. I'd like to thank members for their patience during the course of this meeting, and I declare this public meeting now closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden.